The Jaguars have a couple of players that I think are untradables, guys that they should not get rid of. And be careful when shopping for new parts. I'll tell you about it today on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast, where it is your team every day. And we are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is the #1 sports podcast network. Shout out to our everydayers that join us each and every day. We appreciate you and do not take you for granted. If you're here for the first time, glad you're here. I'll give you an idea of what we're going to do right now. We're going to end the show talking about how positional value does not change regardless of your circumstances. That'll keep teams from reaching. Right in the middle of the show, we'll talk about players over positions. What that means is when you go shopping, sometimes what you're going to look for ain't there, and you got to pick something else up. And that's what we're going to get into. But first, we're going to start our show today talking about untradables. In lieu of some of the most ridiculous trade scenarios I've ever seen, it involves certain people. So as opposed to being an aggregator, or as opposed to just creating a show based off of something that somebody else said, what I'll do is just say, okay, I'll tell you what I think. I'll tell you what I think, not about what they said or not about what they have proposed, because I can appreciate everyone's work. But I'll tell you what I think, and then that'll lead you to understand exactly what I think about what they think or what they said. So here are three guys that I would not trade, and I'm going to tell you exactly why. This does not include people like Trevor Lawrence. It's ridiculous to even think about something like that as of this point. It's crazy. It would not make any sense from a football standpoint, from an optics standpoint, and definitely not from a contractual standpoint. It doesn't make sense. So they're not on the list. You know who else is not on the list? Devon Hamilton. He's not on the list. So y'all can stop talking about that, because that isn't going to happen. Travis Hunter isn't going to be on this list either. You ain't got to worry about that. Nor will Jacoby Myers or Brenton Strange or anybody else that is due for an extension immediately. One guy's on the list is not really due for an extension, but he's going to be playing on his fifth-year option, and that is Travon Walker. There is no circumstance, not one, that exists where I would be trading Travon Walker off of the Jacksonville Jaguars football team. I might be in the minority, but it sounds like if I'm in the minority, there's a couple of people that's right there with me, and that's guys like Anthony Campanile, who may or may not even be here too much longer as the DC, for good reasons, but it sounds like James Gladstone and Tony Baselli and Liam Cohen all believe the same thing I believe is, if you call us about Travon, we're hanging up. He exemplifies everything that we want in our building. You can sit there and talk about where he was picked and who was picked right behind him and compare and contrast those players all you want to, but none of that stuff is going to trump people who are in the building, who know what this guy does for this football team, that does every single thing the way you want it done, exceeds your expectations when it comes to physicality, makes your whole operation go a whole lot better. There are just going to be some people that will go through the mental gymnastics of talking about statistics to the point where they will absolutely drive themselves insane. And I am not one of them. What I'll do is this. I'll choose what information I think is more pertinent. And did I say that word right? Pertinent, right. I'll I can choose to either do two things. I could go with speculation, right nowism, the fact that his sacks were down, and not even think about the fact that he had a hurt hand and a hurt knee for a lot of those games. I can sit here and say, well, they actually need more pass rush. We know he does all of these things. It's not as if they don't have another pass rusher on the team that you can decide to move. If you're trying to move for Maxx Crosby, I would think the person that you're actually trying to move him for is Josh Allen and not Travon Walker. They both do a couple of the same things, but there's one guy that's clearly there to get more sacks than the other. And I think Josh does get a lot of pressure. My solution is add something up the middle, because I think that's where those guys aren't being allowed to benefit from all of the great work they've done, because there's no push in the middle of the defense. Ironically, it seems like there's only push when they go to sub packages and they move Travon inside. I wonder why. Maybe Travon needs a Travon inside instead of y'all trying to turn Travon into a defensive tackle. That's just food for thought for me. Another guy is Parker Washington. And I know he hadn't hit his 3-year window yet, and it's coming up where they can actually give him an extension. I don't believe the Jaguars would entertain any thought of anybody coming in here getting Parker Washington. But just in case some of y'all want to trade Parker Washington, since you're so in the mood to be trading other guys that shouldn't even be popping up in trade conversations, I'm going to make sure that you guys know that I think Parker Washington should be a lifer here in Jacksonville. Yep, I said lifer. I'm talking about Brad Meester, all of that stuff. I think Parker Washington is the dude that you roll with until the wheels fall off, and I think it's going to be a while until they fall off because he's going to be the type of person for your culture that he could stamp your culture the same way they stamp your passport when you go through the airport. Do you got one of those? Let me see. Boom, there it is right there, Parker Washington. Every team that wins needs one or two or three. You have one in Jacksonville. You haven't had a player like that in a long, long time, in my opinion. And I know there are some people that say Christian Kirk. It's not the same. I don't care what happens statistically. God bless Christian. He's a very, very nice guy. It's just not the same. There's not the same run after the catch physicality. There's just not the same going up and catching balls with radius that neither one of them have, but only one of them seems like they use catch radius. And then they're just not the drops. You don't see the drops, the ball hitting the ground when it's not supposed to. I just think he's a better player. Statistics be damned. This is a 13-win team. His numbers aren't going to be good because everything around him is a little bit better than it was when Christian Kirk was here. So Parker Washington is player number 2. Don't even think about it. Untouchable player number 3 comes from a unit, and the unit that it comes from is the one that they need to also help improve the most outside of defensive back, and that is offensive line. The most untradeable player on that unit is Anton Harrison. And I know that there's no thought of nobody who said trade Anton. Well, the thing is, you don't have a first-round pick, and he's the one thing I believe on your roster outside of somebody else that I just mentioned that could get you a first-round pick if you tried to trade for it. I would not move on that at all. Anton Harrison, I hope they extend him too. I hope they pick up his 5th-year option because he was night and day. And they lit a fire under him, and they demanded it. And you know what he did? He lived up to the demand, and he asked for it. And to me, he was their most blue-chip offensive line player on that team. I know some people will say it was Ezra Cleveland, and some will say Cole Van Lanner. To me, the best blue-chip of all of those dudes is Anton Harrison. Plays out in space, does a good job. Are there things that he can improve on? Absolutely. Absolutely. But there's no way I think about getting rid of him as you're talking about moving up. And the reason why I brought this up, because I think a lot of people believe that the way you get better is just by swapping out guys. And at some point, that's kind of true. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you trade players, you swap them out. Sometimes you pay them a little bit less, but you swap out for a more experienced dude that's trying to get a championship. But sometimes you don't swap out. And that's why you don't overpay people. Because when you overpay guys, you can't demote them. You're catching me, right? You can't go out and replace dudes and then demote guys that you're paying $15 million. This is one of the reasons I think they might move from Walker Little being a swing tackle. Walker Little makes too much money to be a swing tackle. But the previous administration overpaid him. I don't think Cole Van Lanner, I think Cole Van Lanner is your starter, but I don't think 2 years from now, if you find a replacement, you can't do something with his contract and make him a swing tackle. But, but they'll be in a different situation age-wise. So that's the thing. Eventually, if you start getting better, what's going to happen is you're going to keep some of the dudes that's your starters now. They're just going to have to be your backups. You're not going to be able to swap them all out, swap 1s and 2s and 3s. You just can't do it. That's why you have to draft better, retain better, find a role for people, be honest with people about it. And that's why messaging matters, and the Jaguars are in a good place. Players over positions. I'm going to tell you exactly what that means in segment 2, but I'll get started with it. What if they go shopping for what they need the most, but that's not what's there? Do you move to the next guy, or Do you just move to another position where the player is very, very good, but it might not necessarily be your biggest need, but it would be an upgrade? That's something you have to consider. And we'll talk about it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Indeed. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed. Sponsored jobs. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates later. If I needed someone for this show, I go straight to Indeed and be very specific about what I need. Real experience, not just a resume buzzword. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results. Using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners to this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help your job the premium placement, give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Today's show is also sponsored and brought to you by Robinhood. What if sports were traded like markets, man? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not just you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changed the game. It's people moving the action. So when the momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always know the game, but I didn't have a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Every trade, every play with Robinhood. Now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. All right, we're moving along here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. Make sure you kick into the Everydayers Club, man. Down in the description, wherever you watch or listen to this show, you get ad-free audio versions of the show and access to our merch store. Just a little bit more for you every day. If you are one of those that want a little bit more, make sure you check that out down in the description, wherever you get or watch your podcast. All right, man. Players over positions, and this is something that is a little bit perplexing, and it's a little bit different for you. You almost have to look at it in terms of hindsight, right? The Jaguars didn't necessarily use their day two picks on folks that you thought they like absolutely needed. They came in last year with running back with Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby. You're like, okay, they got a good 1-2 punch. Well, then they drafted Bashal Tootin, right? And you're like, did they really need to do that? Yeah, they probably did right there in round 4. And then they went and got another one in LaQuint Allen in the 7th round. Both of those guys end up being number two and number 3, and both having value. When one was out, the other one was the number 2. I think the Jaguars are going to look at a lot of different positions that way, because the way that I'm going to describe this is this. All right, so we talk about what the team needs most, right? And then we say, okay, what could use upgrading? And then you look at their contracts. So the bad way you want to be on this is the way you look at it. If you're doing a literal or figurative in your mind, or a graph, if you will, you'd hate to have a player at a need position who you're paying a boatload of money that's going to cost you a boatload of money to get rid of. So if you're paying a guy a bunch of money, the worst thing that guy could be on your table is someone that needs to be replaced. Okay. So you work that back, and then the areas where you do need help, that you don't need help, hopefully those are occupied by people that you have drafted, committed to in some shape or form. If the financial commitment matches, even better, especially when they're putting out a lot of production, and they've become someone that is an extremely needed person. For instance, Trevor Lawrence, whatever money he's making, you can talk whether it's 37 or 55. He's absolutely worth it. Boom. Don't even think about it. He's worth it. Period, point blank, end of discussion. Travon Walker, whatever you're paying him, is worth it. Josh Allen, yeah, but if you still feel like that area needs to get better and improve, this is where you go, okay, so if we want Maxx Crosby, we're not going to get rid of a young asset. We're not going to get rid of a dude that complements him best. We'll get rid of the dude that doesn't do the thing that we would acquire him to do at the rate that we want it done. Josh Allen is a little bit older, has been here longer, is making a lot more money. There's no reason why you need to be trying to replace a pass rusher with a guy who has a bunch of money and then going to keep both of them. If he ain't getting the job done, you need to move on. If that's the way you just call it what it is, man. Stop trying to pretend that we're going to just upgrade the pass rush with Maxx Crosby or Trey Hendrickson, and we're going to keep both of those people we have now, and they're going to stay at defensive end. Or we ain't going to some kind of weird front. The only way you can do that is to go to a weird front. The weird front means, something odd or something where positions aren't necessarily predicated, and you play Travon at a 4I or 4B, and then you use both Allen and whoever you acquire, you stand them up on the outside, and then you have a nose tackle, and then you find you another big end, sort of like the Donnell Autry's of the world, or you play a 3 technique on the other side of Devon Hamilton. You could do it in a weird way, but then you got to ask yourself, okay, are we allocating money to go to the right places? So you have to ask this question. When the Jaguars go shopping, if they have the thing that they need the most, the 2 or 3 things at the top of the list, but they walk into that building and those 2 things might be marginally better than what they have now, but the real gold in that building are lined up at other positions. Now, if it's a position where they're not going to spend the money, like don't even look at George Pickens, they're not going in that direction. If you want to keep Travis Etienne and Bayshaw Tootin and you're happy with LaQuint Allen, those guys as a trio, you're not even looking over at Kenneth Walker, and you're not looking at the running back from the Jets. You're just not doing it. Breece Hall. You're not even paying attention to it. Because while you'll look, you'll be like, yeah, that's cool, but that's not where we're at right now, right? You're gonna look at Kyle Pitts unless you feel like putting him in. If you pay him a whole bunch of money and you got Brenton Strange, who you're gonna eventually pay a bunch of money, now you got to say they better be on the field at the same time a whole bunch. But then when you do that, you're not in your 3 wide set as much, and then you're not in your double halfback sets as much if you're in Jacksonville. So that might be something you say, wow, that's intriguing. We may not do that either. And then you might look and go, okay, the 3 technique. My man from Denver might price us out because there's not a whole bunch out there. And then Tier Tart, he kind of plays both nose guard and 3 technique, and he kind of shades it too a little bit. But is he what we really need as a pass rusher next to Devon Hamilton? And you might pass on that a little bit. So is it about positions or is it about players? What if you walk in there? What if the Jaguars go in there, right? And there's a player that's just so good in this position. They say, that ain't really what we need, but boy, if we got that, that's kind of the approach they took a little bit with the draft with Travis as a 2-way player. I always thought their biggest need was at corner, not wide receiver. It turns out it was a little bit of both, but wide receiver was easier to fix than getting a corner that can be as sticky. And y'all saw that, how the season played out. So don't be shocked if the Jacksonville Jaguars have a dude on their radar that is not on yours, because they're not just looking at what boxes they need to check off. They're looking at how special these dudes are that may check a box off that I already have checked off, but check it off a whole lot better and make us an entirely different team that puts entirely different kind of pressure on all of our opponents, and people won't see that coming. Don't be shocked if it happens. I won't be, but I kind of will be, because I just actually told y'all positions where they don't really need help. But this is something that you have to focus on, not just the things that are obvious and the things that are empty, but focus on the players that are there. and does getting them, regardless of the money, make your team better? Now, you don't want players that's making a lot of money, but playing them together is not good. Like you got too many wide receivers or too many DNs or too many number one corners. That doesn't work. So you still have to fix it and put it in a framework of a team. Positional value doesn't change regardless of your specific needs. That's why I want y'all to pay attention to that too. We'll discuss it here in a second on Locked On Jaguars. All right, today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Drip Drop. Man, Drip Drop works. It absolutely works because you're kicking off the new year. If it's feeling good, if that's your goal, and honestly, hydration is the easiest win. When I stay on top of it, my energy, focus, and mood all level up. But let's be real. Plain water doesn't always cut it, especially when you're grinding through long days, hitting the gym, or just trying to stay consistent with your health goals. That's where Drip Drop comes in. Doctor developed, proven fast hydration that helps your body and mind work better. Think clearer, focus, better energy, elevated mood, even that fresh little glow that you have on your skin, man. Here's what you got to do right now. Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's dripdrop.com. Promo code LOCKEDONNFL for 20% off. Stock up now at dripdrop.com and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. And today's show is sponsored and brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts. You can apply to the bets you like most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boost you want to apply. The boost gives you more juice on the bet you already like instead of forcing you to bet something new. You make your picks, then apply your profit boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL game day and every NFL playoff game day. All right, rolling along here as we continue on Locked On Jaguars, where it is your team every day. We've discussed the untradables, in my opinion, and whether or not the Jaguars will take a players over positions approach. This is that argument that's framed best player available versus need. I kind of like try to do it differently and give you a different way of looking at it because I think that makes it so rigid. It's like black or white, and then there's really no gray area. So the way I broke it down was a little bit of players over positions. Like a team that wins 13 games ain't going to have a ton of needs, but you can always improve. At what point, though, do you bypass selecting your biggest need if there's a player right there that while he addresses a need doesn't necessarily upgrade that unit as much, but he's just a way better player. If it's an apples to apples comparison, if you like need a 3 technique, but you also need a guard, which I think the Jaguars need a right guard, unless they're just that sold on Wyatt Milam at this point in his career. If that's the case, then you'll go, well, we need a 3 technique. There's one available, but he ain't nowhere near as good a 3 technique as that right guard is right guard. And we need a right guard too, but we'd rather have a 3 technique, but that right guard is so good. Then you go get the right guard. That's the point that I'm making. Can you just go players over positions? Based on the little sample size that I have, I think that's what they'll do. I really do. I think they can look at players and go, ooh, if we had a little bit of that, and not look at it as if you have to address the most pressing need first. That's what I told people last year, too, about wide receiver and offensive line. I say they may end up addressing those things the most, but just because they don't address them first doesn't mean they're not a priority. Sometimes the priority is making sure whatever you're addressing first is something that you really, really wanted to get. It was Jordan Lewis last year, right? So this year you have to ask, are they going to do the same things, whether it's in the draft or in free agency? I get the feeling that they will always go for the player, the person that elevates this team, even though there may be a bigger need somewhere else. Because I don't think they're going to force it. I think that they're so in tuned into what does that guy have to offer that can help us in our organization, that they're going to focus on the high side of what the guy has to offer, as opposed to focusing on another guy that offers something that they truly, truly need, but they don't believe that that player can deliver it at the level that this other guy can. So I think they'll always go for the most talented player. Y'all might disagree in that, but it's something that I want y'all to pay attention to, because I do believe the Jaguars have a switch in that way that you can't turn it on and off whenever it's convenient. Like, you can't think that way and then all of a sudden let your need shift. I think they'll trade for a player and give up compensation for a dude before they allow it to make them respond to need over how good they believe a player is. If they were going to do that, that's why I think they shifted their focus. That's why I also believe that they re-signed Cole Van Lannon, because you heard James Gladstone talk about they kind of kept their eye on free agency, like what it would cost and what it was going to be like, and that he was their best alternative and option moving forward. I think they're going to be able to do that too in the offseason. That's why I always say never overpay for anything, because if you do, you can't demote them. You actually have to cut them and then take the dead money. You can always, if a guy comes in and beats them out, you can keep them both if you don't overpay for them, depending on how you drafted a player. So that's why, sometimes when you got a dude that's making a bunch of money and you chomping at the bit to get rid of him, you'll take whatever compensation, because the money is already sunken costs. Interesting. Keep your eyes on all of this stuff. Focus on the things that the Jaguars need. That's going to be a difference. Everyone's going to feel differently about that. Where and how they can get it, we're all going to feel differently about that. But I tell you what we'll do here every day on Locked On Jaguars. We'll continue to try to tie this thing together for you so that we can have a little bit of an idea of the plan that the Jaguars are going to have. And then we'll all proceed to be wrong about it, because we're supposed to be, by design, wrong about it. Because if we're right about it, then that means we should be the ones in charge. You are definitely in charge of the reason I'm here every day, and I appreciate you. We do not take you for granted, man. Right over 27 and a half minutes today on Locked On Jaguars. We'll see you tomorrow, man. We'll be right here and right back all over again.